Hello, and welcome to episode 55 of the Mo Money Podcast, and also the first episode of my special listener series that I'm going to be doing every Thursday for the next little while. Hopefully every Thursday if I get enough awesome listeners to submit their stories to me. And if this might be you, maybe you have a great story. It doesn't have to be great. It just has to be your story. It's all about just learning from each other and talking about money. So if you want to be featured on this special listener series of the Mo Money Podcast, please shoot me an email, jessica@jessicamorehouse.com, and let's see if we can set something up. So this episode is with Amanda D. She's semi-anonymous, but she has an awesome story just about how she got into debt and how she worked her way through it. It's a great story because she explains a lot of the ways that she did it, some of her mistakes, some of her successes, and I think there's just a lot to learn from her experience that I think you'll get a lot out of. So without any further ado, let's just get to the show, shall we? So thanks for doing this. I'm excited. I think I think it's so important for people to know the stories and just the experiences of other people besides just bloggers and podcasters. You know, when you find someone else just, you know, who is just like them and they hear, oh, they're in the same situation, I think that's so impactful.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because, yeah, like, I mean, I love reading the stories of the bloggers and podcasters and that I do follow. I guess, but yeah, it's good to have like a variety of stories out there. Like reading the article and the three other women that you featured in the article, like it was awesome to read because everyone has very different backgrounds.
Very different backgrounds.
Yeah.
Very different stories, which is really cool to be able to see and to hear.
Yeah, no, and that was really good to see because like I was a little bit like I was a little nervous about doing this podcast, but and I was a little nervous about doing the article in the first place because I was like, well, I don't know if my story would resonate with a lot of people because I hear a lot of stories about like my debt repayment was different than like people who like I can't honestly say I like scraped the bottom of the savings barrel all the time, like just barely getting by the skin of my teeth. Like I didn't have like it was still a lot of debt to pay off. I guess I just wasn't sure, was my would people resonate with me, or were they like, do people only want to hear the most extreme stories, or is like mine something that's worthwhile sharing anyways? Because, it was a significant debt. It did take me quite a while to pay it off. And I guess like also like I'm not struggling, like it's hard because I'm like not in the, I find a lot of blogs these days focus on people who are struggling to find employment, which is a huge issue. I totally get that. Struggling to find employment to be able to pay off these debts. So I wasn't sure if like I would resonate with a lot of people because I'm like in these subset, like just because of the type of profession that I'm in. I was very fortunate at the time I graduated to get a job right away and like get a steady paycheck. So I don't know. I don't know if that sounds a bit too self-conscious.
No. And you know what? I'm the same way, actually. I always struggled, and I still, well, not as much anymore, but when I first started my blog, I always struggled. I'm like, am I that interesting? Do I have that, would anyone care what I have to say? Because I don't have a crazy, lots of the bloggers, and I'm friends with lots of them, they have the stories where they were in a boatload of debt and they were able to pay $50,000 off in 2 years. And like, I don't have a crazy story like that. So I'm like, am I boring? But it's like, you know what? It's I think if we just heard all those extreme stories, it almost feel, especially if you're in that situation where, you are still paying off your debt, and you just hear these extremes, you're like, oh, so is that the only way that I can pay off my debt in like a reasonable amount of time or whatever, is just to live it like extremely frugally and just, so I think having like stories from people who did it, maybe over the course of several years, and, it's not so extreme, it's actually more helpful because people can be like, oh, I can actually do that. I can do what they did.
Yeah,
they did it.
Because I didn't, like, obviously I didn't sacrifice huge amounts of things if I was able to take a couple of trips and that. But I guess, like, the thing that I felt maybe that I could at least encourage is that, if you do have the opportunity to, like I said, I could have paid it off faster. I don't regret some things, but there are some other things that now looking back, I'm like, I really could have gotten this done sooner, but maybe not like eating ramen noodles every night so I could pay 64 grand in like a year or something ridiculous like that, which would have been impossible. It would be impossible.
Well, exactly.
Now, right?
It's like, that's not healthy.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you could do it, but that's not healthy. And I'm all about like, being smart, financially, but also don't sacrifice, your basic needs, your health, your, mental health, your emotional health, whatever. So it's about finding that balance. And I think, all those extreme stories aren't necessarily good examples of what you should do. It's, a crazy story of what someone did somehow.
I mean, it's absolutely admirable when people are able to get through that, but it really isn't for everybody. So
no, and not many people can do that, especially if they have dependents, they have family, that they have to take care of. It's like they just can't do that. You need to figure something else out.
Yeah, no. And I guess true. It's money-life balance is what
exactly.
How you advocate. So so no, I really appreciate sharing my story because I really am very passionate about personal finance. Like I really became passionate, and that big driver for that was paying this debt down.
That's
absolutely
awesome.
Huge. It's very encouraging when you see your own net worth go from the red to the black. It's a huge
and it almost seems,
I
still remember, when I moved out for the first time and had no money and was just really starting, my personal finance journey. And even though, it was a tough first year, seeing that money grow, even though it was slow, was so encouraging. And you start to, all those things that you never thought you could afford or you could never do because you just couldn't, oh no, I'm poor. All these opportunities start to be like, oh no, you could actually do that, or you could go on this trip. And, your world becomes bigger the more you understand how to, control your money, stay on budget, make more money, and so on. So I'm excited to chat with you. So let's kind of jump in. Just, of course, people have probably already read your interview on my blog, but in case, do you want to give a short little intro of who you are, Amanda?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a healthcare professional in my mid-30s. So I just turned 35 this year.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just about a month ago. And so I born and raised in Ottawa, and I'm back here now in Ottawa. I've been here most of my life except for a few years when I went away to school. And I guess, in terms of growing up, I mean, I had a pretty, I had a middle-class childhood. My parents did work a lot. So in terms of having discussions around money or personal finance, there wasn't really a lot that I can recall growing up. So I know my parents, talked about, how you need to, save a little bit of money, but they didn't really specify what for. I just sort of felt like I needed to save it for the next big, whatever not significant item I was saving for, whatever toy or whatever video game or whatever thing I was going to be saving up for. But, and I mean, they did push me to get part-time and seasonal jobs, which I'm really grateful for because not just for the money earning experience, but also for the job experience, because it really does work in your favor in the future. And regardless of the fact that most of those jobs don't have anything to do with what I do now. But sorry, I apologize if I ramble here. You are editing.
No, this show is all about rambling. You're not rambling at all. I'm very intrigued by your story, so keep on going.
Yeah, so so when I was 15, I started taking part-time jobs, seasonal jobs, so in the summers and throughout high school. But I didn't really make a huge effort to save a lot of my money. I knew I wanted to go to a certain program at university, and I knew I needed money, but for some reason it didn't register. Oh yeah, I probably should save as much of it as I could because tuition's expensive.
I know. Well, you just don't have the concept of how much things really cost when you're in high school. Like I had no idea. I was very similar to you. I worked and I saved, but I didn't actually know how much I needed.
And I really wasn't certain. Like I knew how much I needed to buy a pair of jeans or whatever, because if I went shopping. But in terms of the tuition, it wasn't until you got the tuition bill that you realized, ooh, I probably should have saved more. But anyway, and my parents did. I was very lucky. My parents were very generous in helping a bit, as much as they could. I mean, middle class earnings. They had 4 kids. It's, money can only go so far. And also, like I said, I went to school in Toronto, and the program I was in is a professional degree program. So that came automatically with, the tuition was double a regular bachelor's degree.
Oh, wow.
At the time. And it's gotten even worse. Believe me, the tuition that I paid back then was a discount compared to the program, what it costs now. And so there was the cost of the double tuition. And then I lived in Toronto. I lived in residence for the whole time, which was very fortunate, that I, had a place to go back to every school year, and I didn't actually have to worry about subletting an apartment every summer or anything like that when I came back to Ottawa to work in the summers. But yeah, it was still pricey enough with the tuition, and also I'm a student in Toronto and I want to have fun, so I'm gonna spend money.
Absolutely. I couldn't imagine not doing that, especially in Toronto when there's just so much to do.
Oh my gosh.
When you're young.
Yes, especially as a student, you just the options are unlimited. Yeah. So
how did you, you seem like you made some good choices by, working, when you were in high school and in the summers when you weren't in school, and then saving up some money. But is that kind of what led you into the debt? Did you eventually have to get student loans?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So my very first year of university, I was able to pay that completely. Somehow I had a bit of a moment of brilliance when I was a teenager, and I had a GIC tucked away. And back then the GIC rates were much higher than they are now. Yeah. Much higher. So I, made some good interest. So I was actually able to pay off my entire first year of university. But then I had 4 more years to pay off. And because I was not really saving all of my summer job and seasonal job earnings, I was, I did have to take out quite a bit. So I did take out OSAP. So Ontario Student Assistance program. I think that's what it stands for.
I think that's what it is.
So I took out Canada Student Loans, OSAP. I took out as well the bank, being as generous as they are, had a special loan program for people who were studying a professional level degree. So very generous of them. They offered me a loan, and I took it.
Of course.
And yes, absolutely. And I took it for 4 years. I took loans every year from the bank. On top of OSAP. And then also I did get a couple of bursaries from my school as well. But yeah, it was pretty insane how quickly it added up. And then
did you have a concept of oh wow, I'm really getting into debt when you were in school, or did you I'll worry about this when I'm done?
You know what? I didn't. All I worried about was making sure that I paid my tuition bills on time, which I did. I didn't care where the money came from, whether it was my own earnings or whether it was from the debt. I just wanted to make sure my tuition bill was paid so I could keep going to classes and everything was fine. But I didn't really have a good concept of keeping track of my money. In fact, and this is something that still have some shame about to this day. So I had, so I had a student visa card.
No one's perfect.
Yeah. So I had a student visa card, and oh my gosh, I missed a payment. And so so that's how much attention I was paying to my finances. I missed a payment. Yeah. And I got a call from Visa. So it was Visa. And they said, you are late on a payment. And anyway, I did my due diligence and I went and paid it right away. With some other debt money, of course. So I was in that debt shuffling mode at the time. So I don't know. I wasn't aware of how, they said it's going to affect your credit score and all this if you don't pay it. I'm like, okay, I will pay it and fine. Although I had no concept what a credit score really was back then. Exactly. I really was so clueless in university about my finances.
The fact. Yeah, I mean, you and I think so many people, because it's no one, unless you, like you're doing now, and other people listening to this podcast, unless you kind of, go out on your own and do your own research. I mean, there's not a lot of people aren't really talking about, being smart with your money in university. No one talked about it when I was in school.
No, and I didn't really have a lot of guidance on how to do a budget and how to account for all these costs. It might have been partially due to the fact also I was the first person in my household to go to university. So no one else had that experience and was able to tell me, you want to budget for these kinds of different expenses. Like I didn't know I had to pay extra expenses for like photocopying fees and like all these other things that were part of, like when I was looking at the fee schedule, paying my tuition, I didn't realize how many fees I had to pay. So
exactly.
Complete surprise. And, but I mean, like I said, all I cared about, I paid my bills and then I got to move on with my studies. And I was so busy with studying and then also just having fun as a student. I didn't really care about finance. So and then when I graduated and I came back to Ottawa, I did an additional training year in my field. So I did make a stipend, so not very much money, but still it was enough to be able to get a small apartment and be able to live off of lots of pasta. So that's when I started knowing, learning a bit more about budgeting for rent and food and that kind of stuff. Because when you're in residence, you have a meal plan, you don't have to worry about it. But when you're living on your own, you have to worry about groceries and such. But I still had a lot of credit because of the profession I was getting into. The bank was more than happy to extend my line of credit to at some point upgrade my life. I think I mentioned that in the article. Yeah. So I did accept that line of credit. And I still, I do remember this at some point as I was racking on all this debt and, eventually building it up to the, to its peak. I thought to myself, I know that, I really will have to pay this off one day. But then at some point I also thought to myself, I'm just going to be in debt forever. So I might as well just enjoy it. Like that was the attitude I had back then. I was just completely.
And was it because it was just like it was such a huge number you had to pay off? You're like, well, that's never going to happen.
I feel like I just was admitting defeat. Like I feel like, you know what? I'm just never going to be fully out of debt. If it's not this thing, if it's not the student debt, it's going to be a line of credit or a car loan or a mortgage. I'm just going to have to accept that I'm going to be in some sort of debt for the rest of my life. That was the attitude that I had back then. It was a really different attitude than what I eventually came to.
So what I'm curious about, because I feel like that attitude specifically is very, very common. The people that are in huge amounts of debt, they feel, just overwhelmed and it just seems impossible. I know like lots of my friends are, my age, 30, and, they still have, a lot of money to pay off for their student loan. And, they've been out of school for like 7 years. And it seems basically like, oh, well, that debt's never going to go away. It's just going to haunt me forever. But you, eventually kind of turned things around. What kind of changed everything for you where you're like, no, I'm not going to let this dictate what my life is going to be like?
So it took a couple of years of pain, as I did eventually, decide, okay, I got to do something about this, but I wasn't really serious at first about this something that I had to do about it. I just sort of accepted, all right, I'm just going to pay off this loan over 10 years. But in the meantime, I'll probably, like I said, end up with a car loan, mortgage, all that kind of stuff in the meantime. So anyway, when I I had to start paying off, the student debt after the Canada student loan 6 months after I graduated. But I still continued to pile on more debt. And the peak of my indebtedness happened about 2 years after graduation. And at that point, that's when I consolidated my loans and had that nice big $64,000 debt staring at me in the face whenever I looked at my online banking. So when it came to paying it off, so I think I mentioned first, I consolidated all my loans on the advice of a family friend of ours who's an accountant.
And you did that to get a lower rate? To
get a lower rate, yeah. Because at the time, when I was paying off my Canada student loan, my rate was prime plus 4.5%. At that point, prime was 6%. So I was paying a 10.5% interest rate on this Canada student loan. Yes, high. It was pretty high. Yeah. And then on the line of credit was around 6%. So then I was able to consolidate for prime plus half. So went from 10.5 to 6.5%. So huge difference. Still a large number to pay off. But so this was in around 2007 was when I did this consolidation. And then we know what the financial markets did the following year. And then after that point, that's when interest rates started going down. And had a variable rate on my interest rate on my loan. So in a way, you know, and I didn't realize at the time, to be honest, I was completely oblivious to what the markets were doing at the time. I just knew that the interest on my debt had gone down for some reason. So I was happy, but unfortunately the rest of the world wasn't. That's how much I was oblivious to money and finance. Like I was just, anyway. So yeah, I paid off I was starting to pay off more of the principal every month. And then, so eventually, I was dating my boyfriend at the time, now my husband. We've been together for over 10 years now. So anyway, we decided to move in together. So I had this big, massive student/consumer debt. I have to be honest, it was a lot of consumer debt in there as well. So we moved in together. I moved in with him because he owned a place. Still have a mortgage on it, but he owned his condo I was renting. So I moved in with him. And so this is one thing. So I've read different opinions as to, you know, when you move in and combine your finances, you know, how should you handle the debt? And I know there's like different opinions on this. My personal opinion was that was my debt that I racked up. I racked it up through my own education and my own consumer spending habits. So I never once asked him to help me with that debt. So I actually paid off that debt with all just my own money because I felt it wasn't really a shared debt. I know some people will argue, no, when you share your household, you share everything. But I just, in my mind, didn't feel right asking him to help me with that. So I focused on, you know, we split our common expenses equally, you know, because I was living here. I helped with paying the mortgage as well. And I took care of my debt myself. So, along with moving in with him. So this is where I'm going to get to what got me, you know, gave me the kick in the pants that I needed to pay it off faster. He had cable TV. I didn't in my apartment. So one day I was sitting watching whatever, shows I was watching. I was flipping through and I came on to Gail Vaz-Oxlade's show.
Love Gail.
Yes, that's where I met Gail.
Yes.
Next time was Till Death Do Us Part. And I just got so fixated on it. And really it just made me realize how much this debt was holding me back from moving forward in life. So, I mean, a couple of things, like it was holding me back from feeling the freedom that comes with being debt free. It was holding me back from being able to save from the future. I mean, I have also, I'm fortunate that I do have a pension with my work. But, you know, I plan like a pessimist. You just never know what pension funds are going to do in the future. So it's still important to have savings. I still fully think that I need to have my own savings. But I wasn't saving. And also I was taking a risk having this much debt, because if something were to happen to me, and this was something that came up a lot in Till Death Do Us Part, you know, if something were to happen to, you know, these, you know, say it's like a couple of parents with kids and they have huge amounts of debt, something were to happen to them, what's going to happen, you know, to their home, to, you know, to their children, you know, like, so all these scenarios that she was talking about. And I was thinking to myself, oh my God, what would happen if something happened to me and all this debt is like not been paid? And I don't know. I didn't want to fathom that any further. So anyway, so in her words, I decided to stop being a total dope, and decided to actually get serious about paying this debt off faster. So I started reading her books, and then her books. So like things like Debt Free Forever was the first one I read. Never Too Late. And then I've read a couple of her other ones. I'm just plugging Gail Vaz-Oxlade on this show.
I love Gail. So the more that, that's totally cool with me.
Your podcast with her, amazing. I love that.
Oh, that was a dream come true.
Oh my gosh.
Come on.
Yeah, that was amazing. So but yeah, so her work really was very inspirational. And then her work led me towards other resources. So I just started reading everything I could get my hands on. So I started reading personal finance books, articles that I found in like Globe and Mail, Financial Post. I was watching Gail shows religiously. So Till Death Do Us Part and Princess. Yeah. And then I started also doing other things at the same time. So like I said, I was paying down my debt faster. So I actually doubled up my payments every month. And I also added lump sums wherever I could. So I really cut out a lot of spending, because as I was doing the 10-year repayment plan that was originally prescribed, I was still spending money on frivolous things. So what I did was cut out a lot of frivolous things. Not everything. I still, I still, we still ate well, still lived very well with each other. I mean, it helps, I guess, having, combining a household. So we have more. That
does help.
Yeah, it really does help. Let's be honest.
It really
does help when you combine, when you're not paying as much, because you're not living on your own. It is a lot easier for couples to put their finances together, to live as a single person and pay all of these things as well. So yeah, I did everything I could. And then at the same time, to help motivate me further, I did open an RSP account and a TFSA account at the same year. So I started putting away just a little bit automatically from every paycheck was siphoned off. So I could plan for that to be siphoned off every single paycheck, a certain amount of the TFSA, a certain amount of the RSP. And then I also learned about the emergency fund. So I opened up a separate savings account and put money in that. And my goal was to get about, I know that there's varying opinions out there, to get 3 months of my gross income into that account. Yeah. And it took a couple of years, but I did end up getting that finally put in there. So it just, because
doesn't it feel good? Like, I feel just so much more secure in my life when I've got an emergency fund.
I've got an emergency fund, and when I use it, I'm not paying interest on it, because that was the other thing. Yeah. Like, I read some finance articles recommend, you don't need to put away that much cash, you should just have a line of credit. Well, no, at this point, I was so motivated to get out of debt and stay out of debt. There was no way I was going to take out a line of credit for emergencies, because I turned, somehow in this whole process, psychologically, I turned myself around from just blindly accepting that I'm just be in debt for the rest of my life, so I might as well just get used to it, to finally being like, no, I never want to be in that kind of debt again. I mean, yes, I totally get, like, with house prices being what they are.
Yeah, you got to have a mortgage if you want a house, unless you're a millionaire.
Yeah, a mortgage, and that's like realistically, yes. But I don't want to have any debt that is not a mortgage,
Yeah, that is preventable.
Basically. Exactly. So, yeah, so, like, it's just complete, like, 180 on my attitude around debt. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. I hope that answered that question well.
Oh, yes, it did.
Excellent.
It did, and more.
Excellent. Perfect.
No, I think so many people can relate to your situation, especially, like, I mean, this sounds exactly like me when I started getting interested in personal finance. You get kind of, not addicted might be the bad word, but you just, like, really, you're like, oh my gosh, this whole world of information that's going to help me, really, it changes your life once you understand the core principles of personal finance and what you can do to get rid of your debt, stay out of debt, progress in your career, make more money, invest wisely, and all this stuff. It really does make the biggest difference in your life. It
really truly does. It really does. I can't say enough about how much all of these resources that I found, and it's great because this personal finance sphere has just exploded in the past few years. Like, I started on this personal finance journey really back in 2009, and there was a lot back then around.
Yeah.
Gail, other ones that I used were like, or other resources I used were like, Dave Chilton's Wealthy Barber was a fun, The Wealthy Barber and The Wealthy Barber Returns, both excellent books. I was reading articles in the Globe and Mail. I found Mr. Money Mustache, who's also really fun. I'm just going to, like, plug some of my favorites here.
Yeah.
But even since then, there's been, like, a huge wealth of new ones. There's this podcast called the Mo Money Podcast that's amazing.
It's a great podcast.
It is a pretty great podcast. Yeah, no, I've become very hooked on podcasts. So this is one of my regulars. Budgets and Cents has also been an excellent one. And there's also, like, some YouTubers as well. Actually, there's one YouTuber, sorry, I'm sidetracking here a little bit.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
But I just, really thinking a lot about the psychology around personal finance and investing and getting out of debt, because there is a huge psychological component to all of this. There's this vlogger by the name of Canna Campbell. I don't know if you've ever heard of her. She's Australian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'll check her out.
Yeah. So her website website is called sugarmama.tv. I know it sounds really funny, but she does explain why she, in one of her videos, but she does these videos where she herself is actually a financial advisor in Sydney. But she has videos every Monday and every Thursday, and she talks about things such as there was this really impactful video I saw of hers called Getting Out of Mental Poverty. So looking at like the psychology of people that she sees in her workplace, that are like people who are coming to her for investment advice, and how she sees the difference between their financial situations depending on the mindset they take towards their financial situations. Like the ones who just sort of like give up and just sort of say, oh, I'm just going to accept my lot in life, that I'm just never going to be rich. They tend to languish and just never really get very far. Whereas then there's people who, even if they come from, very financially difficult backgrounds, if they take an attitude of, that they're going to, they work hard, they save, they, do everything right financially. I know it's not always perfect, but she sees generally they tend to actually flourish quite well. I'm not doing this video justice whatsoever. You have to look it up. But
okay, no, I for sure will. No, I absolutely agree. It's, and that's just like a good lesson for life. If you're more positive in life, even if, it's still, there's struggles and it's not always easy. I feel like when I'm in a positive mindset, I get more accomplished and I just feel better about my situation. Whereas if I'm negative, of course, everything's going to be crap, like if you're negative, have a negative money mindset, or always being like, well, yeah, but I can't afford it, or I'm poor. It's like, well, you don't have to be, you may not be wealthy or like crazy rich in the future, but you can get to a point where you're financially comfortable.
Yeah. And like she said, it's mental poverty, these people, these people who, like I can say from my own experience, like if I had stayed in that state of just like accepting that I was going to be in debt the rest of my life, like I don't even want to imagine where I would be now, but just changing that mindset and making the conscious decision to change my attitude towards my finances, towards debt, like has made such a huge difference. I feel, like if an emergency happened tomorrow, the car, well, I guess car broke down. People will say car is not necessarily an emergency. I don't know. I need my car to get to work.
Yeah, if you actually do need your car for work, that'd be
like the car broke down, or like a pipe burst or something, we need to call an emergency plumber. We have it covered. We don't have to worry. And just that feeling alone was worth all of like the work that I put in to get to this point. So making the effort to work hard, to set the money aside, and to cut back on spending on things that really were not adding any value to my life. So, but yeah. All right. So I'm old enough there, but so.
No, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your great pieces of advice. I think honestly, the best way to learn about, something new, or just to, get better at something, is to learn from someone else's experience. So thank you for sharing your experience with me.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
And that was episode 55 of the Mo Money Podcast, and the first of my listener series Thursday episodes that I'm going to be doing for the next little while. I've got a few recorded, but I absolutely need more, guys. So if you've listened to this episode and you're like, I would love to share my story on this show, guess what? I want to hear from you. So please shoot me an email at jessica@jessicamorales.com. And maybe we can set something up. Maybe if you're the right fit, we can chat and have a grand old time. Make sure to check out the show notes. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what this episode was all about. I'm going to also include the link to the original interview, the blog interview I did with Amanda. So you'll want to check all that out. And thanks again for listening. If you haven't subscribed on iTunes yet, make sure to just hit that little button. And if you like what you heard, please be so kind send me a review. Give me a review on iTunes. I would really appreciate it, and I would give you the a shout out on a future episode. So please, 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 please give me a review.